Hello and welcome to Good or Bad. Do you guys remember that kick-ass awesome movie Friday the 13th Part 3? Well, of course you do. This is the parody of it. This is Camp Death 3 in 2D, which is a good name, so already you get points there. This movie was directed by Matt Frame and was released in 2018. So if this movie is a parody of Friday the 13th Part 3, how does it parody it? Well, it's all about a killer, you see, that stalks a campground. And the killer's name is Johan Van Dam. Not sure why, but maybe the joke was just lost on me. I personally can't wait for the parody of this movie, starring Freddie Seagal. So Johan, who is played by Terry Mullet, stalks Camp Crystal Meth. At least I get that joke. Although it is worth noting that while Johan is supposed to be a parody of Jason, or at least I assume so, his appearance is more Michael Myers-y, which could just be a nod to one of Friday the 13th's biggest influences. And the movie opens, quite fittingly, with a parody of the opening of Friday the 13th Part 3, where we see what would have been the final girl of the previous encounter with Johan tricking him with a hand puppet. She makes him think the hand puppet is his mother, and then bludgeons him with it. To be fair, I think Jason may have fallen for that as well. So right from the first 2 minutes of the movie, you know what kind of film you're in for. It is a silly, ridiculous, and downright insane parody. And I think I'm going to be using that word a lot in this review. This film is in the same vein as other parody films like Scary Movie or Disaster Movie. You know, the over-the-top stupid parody genre, which I have to admit I'm not a huge fan of, even the good ones. But anyway, let's meet our happy campers that Johan will be politely massacring this movie.
Hi everyone! My name is Todd Boogiumper. I'm the head counselor, and I want to warmly welcome you to Camp Crystal Meth.
Just keep smiling. Just keep smiling.
And crumpled at the base of the tree over there is Barry. He's our head men's counselor.
As difficult as that might be. So I feel I should say that the people staying at Camp Crystal Meth are all mentally ill, as the campground was actually reopened as a rehab centre. You know, following the events of Johan's previous massacre. God bless the mental health industry. To be fair though, the movie itself, using its rather cool newspaper clippings intro title sequence, does call this guy an idiot for turning it into a rehab centre. Todd is played by Dave Panook, and his surname is Boogiumper, because jokes. He is a hapless idiot that does actually add a layer of charm to this movie. One of the few layers of charm. So Todd tells the campers about the story of Johan, which, as you can probably tell, it's another direct parody scene. And what follows is what always follows in a slasher movie, regardless of whether you're an insane over-the-top parody or not. Death.
Luck has run out for these 10 mental outpatients, as they've been prescribed 2 heaping spoonfuls of death.
And the deaths in this movie are as appropriately bonkers as you would expect them to be. Someone even gets killed by Johan rapidly firing toast at them, which I have to admit, I have never seen before. Then there's a cop that criticises how Johan is killing him and instructs him on how to do it better, which I gotta admit, while it does go on for a little too long, it's a funny idea.
The main things that you want to focus on when you're trying to stab somebody are the major intestines, arteries, and liver. A lot of people don't know it, but the liver is almost an instant kill. So you're going to want to get real in there like this. Ah!
And as you can probably tell from that clip, this movie uses a fair amount of CGI blood splatter effects. And I just think fake blood is always better, even for comedic purposes. Which luckily the movie does use as well, I just wish it used more of it. But Johan isn't the only one out there doing some damage. This movie also has extremely violent squirrels in it. And I love this because there's something about seeing a toy squirrel violently attacking someone that just amuses me. Now, does it add anything to the plot? No, but it's fun, so the movie is all the better for having it. But that was just the squirrel's first appearance, which happens fairly early on in the movie. But the squirrel returns later in the movie, and we see that the squirrel does cocaine because, of course it does. And the squirrel kills someone by blowing cocaine at them until they die. And beyond an incredible amount of laughter, I don't really know what to say about this. But let's get back to the non-drug addicted woodland animal related scenes. This movie also features anti-gravity bikes and lightsabers. Because what would a parody of Friday the 13th be without those? So we go from parodying Friday the 13th to Return of the Jedi. And everyone called me crazy for saying Jason Voorhees should have been in Star Wars. Come on guys, it could have worked. This movie starts off silly, it really does. There's no denying it. But as it goes on, it just builds and builds on the craziness. The same way a slasher movie would build on suspense. So you can't fault it for having the structure of a good slasher parody. Then we have the climax of the movie, which contains revelations. Not biblical revelations, I mean, they reveal stuff. But I'm not gonna tell you what happens, because it's actually quite clever. It takes some of the Friday the 13th mythos and twists them into a crazy but satisfying reveal. But don't ask me why Todd is dressed as Santa Claus. But hey, at least it gives me an excuse to make this review in December. So we get this really cool twist, and then the movie just goes batshit insane again until we hit the credits. And this insanity involves a raft flying up into the air propelled by a rocket. But that's all I will say about that. The movie ends shortly after. So overall, this movie is mind-bendingly absurd, and I found at times it was a little difficult to sit through. I mean, not after last season difficult to sit through, but still difficult to sit through, as it got a little too crazy at times, and a lot of the jokes just didn't quite hit the mark.
Get back to work! 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 Fucking go back to work! Cook something! You fucking foreigner! Go back to work! Get back to work, you fucker!
Yeah, this movie has needlessly offensive jokes. Now, I'm not being all PC mad here. I'm really not. I'm just saying, why include an offensive joke if it doesn't serve the plot or build character? In fact, that applies to all jokes, not just offensive jokes. You need them to relate to what is happening in your movie, because that's how you make a good film. Things need to connect to each other. But in a world where people are easily offended, should movies shy away from what would be without a doubt considered offensive? Because offensive jokes are made all the time in movies and television, but there's a right way and a wrong way of doing them. A show like South Park, for example, can pull it off because it usually has a deeper meaning or a running commentary behind it. So we get caught up in the overall story of the joke, rather than the joke itself. But here the jokes are forced into the story, rather than being a result of the story. It's not good, and has no relevance to anything happening in the movie. And it reminds me of when I was younger and I used to play the older Call of Duty games, because a lot of the time, that's what the chat lobby was like. But that aside, I think this movie has a ton of potential, and in many respects it does do a good job. I mean, I can't fault the acting. I genuinely believe everyone's insane, and as for the effects, they're okay, by comparison to a YouTube fan movie, but certainly couldn't hold up to anything else. I mean, to be fair, this movie did have a budget of 35,000 Canadian dollars, which I believe is significantly less in US dollars, and even less in British pounds sterling. So given the tight budget and all the hard work that went into making this, it's hard not to appreciate what they actually managed to accomplish with those limitations. Also, I should definitely not neglect to mention that this character here gets a song to sing, and I have to admit, it's actually quite funny. And another thing this movie did right was several of the setup shots. They are downright beautiful. In fact, the overall visual style of this movie has to be commended. So the last thing I will say about this movie is I personally didn't enjoy it. But I really am not the intended target audience for over-the-top absurd parody movies. I prefer more grounded parodies like Shaun of the Dead. As to whether I can call this a good parody though? No, it's not. It does get some stuff right, but most of the time this film feels like it's on drugs, which takes you away from the source material of the parody, until that really clever ending snaps it back into focus. And then it loses itself almost immediately after that. So hopefully I have given you some idea of whether you will like this movie. And if you think you will, make sure you have watched Friday the 13th parts 1, 2 and 3 first, because then you will appreciate some of the smarter moments of this movie, as few of them as there may be. You have been watching Good or Bad, and I'll see you next time.